Okay, good afternoon and welcome to our August 12th, 2024 land use hearing. I call this meeting to order at 3 p.m. And as is our tradition, if you would be kind enough to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Thank you all very much. My name is John Cafalas, Commissioner from District 1, joined by my Commissioner colleagues, Kristen Stevens from District 2, Jody Shattuck McNally from District 3. Across the way, we have Frank from our County Attorney's Office and a variety of folks, planners and whatnot from the Community Development from the Planning Division. And so basically we'll finish introducing ourselves. Jenny will give an overview of how we conduct these things. And then I'll say a little bit about making sure it's clear the distinction between consent agenda items. I'll go through the agenda and I'll clarify consent agenda items and discussion items. So with that, again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking the time. Jenny, would you like to take over, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We respectfully request that all members of the audience silence their electronic devices. Please help yourself to a copy of the agenda and hearing procedure instructions, which are located on the wall right by the entrance to the hearing room and are also posted on the website at larimer.org/bocc/commissioners-meetings for those of you who are joining us on Zoom. Please wait to speak until you are recognized by the chair. Please maintain civility, refraining from audience applause, comments, or disruptions, whether positive or negative. Please make all comments to the Board of County Commissioners from the podium. We do have a portable microphone available as needed. When you make your comments, please state your name at the beginning and provide the spelling of your name if it's unique. Please speak directly into the microphone so that those participating remotely may hear. Upon request, assisted listening devices are available for the hearing impaired. For those on Zoom, attendees will be muted until they are recognized by the chair. If an online attendee wishes to speak or requests that a consent item be removed, please use the raise hand function on the Zoom control bar, or if you're joining us on the phone, *9. With that, I'll introduce the rest of staff. We have Principal Planner Matt Lafferty, Senior Planner Michael Whitley. We have Christina Struggins with our admin support. We're also joined by Connor Sheldon from our engineering department. We have Laura Culleton, also a planner, and our Community Development Director, Rebecca.
Thank you, Jenny. Well done. So, folks, let me just go through what's on the agenda, and then I'll say a word or two about consent agenda items and how they're different from discussion items, and then we'll proceed. So, on our agenda today, we have the following items, land use items listed. The first are consent agenda items. The first is the Brown Family Conservation Development Preliminary Plat, file number 19-Land 3867. The second consent agenda item is the Jeffrey Minor Land Division, file number 24-Land 4412. The third item, the Riverside Farm second filing, amended plat and right-of-way vacation, file number 19-Land 3877. We will, at the request of the applicant, we will be tabling that item, so we will not be addressing that item. And my understanding is that when the notices went out to inform the neighbors about this proposal, I think there was the number referring to the file number was a little bit incorrect. And so we want to make sure that folks get the right file number so that if they have input, they can provide it. So number 3 is tabled. I think there's a date. I forget what it is.
It's until September 23rd.
September 23rd. That particular item will be on the agenda as potentially as a consent agenda item unless we hear from the public. Moving right along, folks. Thank you. The next consent agenda item is the legislative rezoning from open O and rural residential RR-2 to natural resources. file number 24-Zone E, Zone 3670. And then the final consent agenda item is 6558 8th Street Southeast Appeals, file number 22-Zone 3194. So there are 4 consent agenda items remaining. Let me just say, list the discussion items, the public hearing discussion items. Let me take a breath for a moment. The first is, and they're all similar, but they're at different locations. The first is 13938 West County Road 18E, the Pano AI appeal, file number 24, GNRL 0554. The second is the location is 9375 Gold Mine Road, Pano AI appeal, file number General 0555. The third is the location is 3519 Minuteman Drive, again, a Pano AI appeal, file number General GNRL 0556. The fourth is 740 North County Road 41, a similar type of appeal. The file number is 0557. And again, these pertain to a wireless communication facility, cell towers, and the request of the applicant is regarding security cameras, and we'll hear more about that when we get to it. Oh, and then, of course, there is, I would be remiss, the fifth discussion item is the Larimer County Land Use Code Amendment. So proposed amendments to our land use code, file number 24 CODE code 0278. So that is what is on the agenda. And very quickly, a consent agenda item is typically something that we're not aware of any perceived controversy. It's more an administrative action in nature. And typically, we will look at all of those and offer one motion to approve those items in mass. There is the option of a commissioner pulling consent agenda items off of the consent agenda. That is an option that we have. And then it would become a discussion item with a presentation, the applicant, a public comment, etc. It is also the option of the public, if they wish to remove something from the consent agenda, they can do so. So that is consent agenda. And then, of course, the items listed as discussion items will have a full presentation. The applicant will have an opportunity. There'll be an opportunity for comment, opportunity for rebuttal, deliberation, and then we'll do our best to make informed decisions. Did I cover that? Did I miss anything, colleagues? So at this time, and I'm hoping that that's clear to you all because that's what's most important. At this time, we'll look at the. I'll entertain. Well, first of all, forgive me, colleagues. Do you wish to remove anything, any of the 4 items from the consent agenda?
No, do we have to officially, can you remind me, do we have to officially remove the item 3 and table it? Or can we do
It's a
that
good
as one
question.
motion with the consent item, or
Thank
what's the
you,
best way to do that?
Commissioner.
Probably a good idea to go ahead and just make a motion to table it until September. I forget what the date, whatever day in September.
September 23rd.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. So let's do that first. A motion to table the third consent agenda item till September 23rd. Please offer that motion, Commissioner Stevens.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I move to table item number 3 on the consent agenda, the Riverside Farm second filing amended plant and right-of-way vacation to September 23rd.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a proper motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right, aye. That passes 3-0. We will now go to the consent agenda. And I think I'll go with you again, Commissioner Stevens. I haven't forgotten you. Don't worry, you'll have your chance.
I feel forgotten, Mr. Chair.
I'm terribly sorry about that. So, first of all, take a deep breath. Are there any items that are remaining on the consent agenda that either of my colleagues wish to remove? I don't believe so. Is there anyone here in person who wishes to remove any of those 4 items from the consent agenda, which means it would be a full presentation?
Chairman Cafalis?
Yes?
Oh, sorry, go. I'm sorry.
We do have a hand raised online.
Yes, I was going to go to online in a moment. And also there is a revised condition of approval. So it does not appear that anyone here in person wishes to remove any of the 4 items from the consent agenda. Jenny, let's go to online and see what that raised hand is all about.
Karen Salza, if you'd unmute yourself, you're allowed to speak.
Yes, I'd like to ask a couple questions about the 24-G and RL0557.
That item is actually on our discussion agenda. Right now, we're on consent items. Do you
Okay.
wish to pull anything from the consent agenda? Otherwise, you'll have a chance to speak when we pull that item for discussion.
I apologize. I couldn't get the link to work in order to hear the numbers for the 4 items, so I apologize.
No problem.
And thank you. Is it Karen?
Yes,
Yeah, please stay on. We'll go through the consent agenda, and then we'll have opportunities for folks to engage when we get to the discussion items. So thank you, and I'm glad we can hear you loud and clear, so that's a plus. Hopefully you can hear us as we move forward. So is there anyone else online, Jenny, who may have raised their hand wishing to remove something?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then let's go with the motion to approve. And there is a bit of a statement that needs to be made about item number 2. Commissioner Stevens?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the items on the consent agenda, including with revised conditions for item number 2, subject to the conditions in the staff reports, and further move to authorize the chair to sign the findings and resolutions.
Thank you, Commissioner. It looks like, Matt, you had your hand up.
Yes, Chairman Cafalis. Item number 4, legislative zoning amendments that are being made, also includes 2 motions inside of that. You only need to make the 1 motion to approve the consent agenda, but we wanted you to be aware that you are approving the zoning, and in addition, we will be, you're approving to publish the official zoning map. It will be recorded with the clerk and recorders. We're finalizing some amendments to that, and then that will be recorded, and so you're authorizing that as well.
Thank you, Matt. And again, that's one of the consent agenda items, but colleagues, do you have any questions about that particular thing? So thank you for pointing that out regarding that, the rezoning, that there are 2 items in there. And thank you, Commissioner Stevens, for pointing out that there's a modified or revised condition of approval regarding item number 2. So with that understanding, there is a motion on the table. Colleagues, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. So what we just did, if you weren't following that, is we just approved en masse with some clarification and one of the conditions of approval revised the 4 items that were listed on the consent agenda. So we will now shift gears, and we're losing our engineers now. That's too bad. We'll now shift gears to the public hearing discussion items. And again, I believe there are 4 items that are different locations. Michael, I believe this is yours, and you could help explain how we're going to approach this and then provide the information, sir.
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Michael Whitley, Senior Planner with the Larimer County Planning Department. So as you noted, there are 4 separate applications under consideration by the board this afternoon. They are at different locations, but they are all related. They are the same appeal. And so you will have the opportunity to make 4 separate motions and provide 4 separate votes on the applications. But I will bundle the presentations into one presentation for the 4 applications, and then we can talk about, kind of differentiation of the application should that come up during discussion. So the four applications are the 13938 West County Road 18E Pano AI Appeal, File 24 GNRL 0554. The 9375 Gold Mine Road Pano AI Appeal, File 24 GNRL 0555. The 3519 Minuteman Drive Pano AI Appeal, File 24 GNRL 0556. And lastly, 740 North County Road 41 Pano AI Appeal, file number 24 GNRL 0557. And so just for reference, the person who would like to provide public comment would like to provide comment on that last application. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get there. So all four of these requests are requests for appeals to Section 937 of the Land Use Code, which allows for the placement of cameras or other surveillance on wireless communication facilities, commonly known as cell towers, only for the safety and security of the wireless communication facility. So if approved, the appeals would allow for the placement of cameras on existing towers for the detection of fires and dissemination of information to emergency responders. So what we're talking about today is the placement of cameras on existing towers. So this would not affect the construction of any new towers or the expansion of any existing cell tower. So I do have an overview map that shows the location of the four applications. So the West County Road 18E application is the southernmost. That is located west of Loveland. We also have the Gold Mine Road application. That is located west of Fort Collins. A little bit further north, but also west of Fort Collins, is the Minuteman Drive Pano AI Appeal. And then lastly, furthest north, northwest of Fort Collins, is the North County Road 41 AI Appeal. So I have a little bit of additional information for each of these applications. So the first application is located approximately 1/4 mile northeast of the intersection of County Road 18E and Green Mile Drive. Again, this is west of Loveland. The property is 120 acres and it's zoned O, which stands for open. There's an existing 80-foot tall tower, and the cameras are proposed to be located on that tower. Next, we've got the Gold Mine Road property. That is located approximately 3/4 of a mile north of the intersection of Stag Hollow Road and Gold Mine Road. That is a 38.77 acre property zoned open. And there's an existing 60-foot high tower on that property. Third application is on Minuteman Drive. That is located approximately 2 miles northwest of the intersection of Minuteman Drive and Soderberg Drive. That intersection's here. This is a 5-acre parcel zoned open, and it is surrounded by Horsetooth Mountain open space. But there is an existing tower on that property. It is privately held. The tower is 140 feet, and it has a lightning rod that is 29 feet 5 inches on top of that 140 feet. And lastly, there is 740 North County Road 41 Bellevue. That is located east of the intersection of North County Road 41 and Tip Top Road. So those roads kind of intersect right here. This is a 5-acre parcel zoned O open. And for reference, this is Risk Canyon Road to the north. So it is south of Risk Canyon Road, close to the top of Risk Canyon Road where it intersects Stowe Prairie Road. That tower, where the camera is proposed to be located, is 75 feet tall. Now, on that particular parcel, there are 6 cell towers. So some of them are non-conforming, some of them went through a zoning review process, but there are 6 towers all considered to be legal. Now, the cameras, we do have a picture of the proposed cameras. This is from the application materials. This is pictures of existing cameras on other cell towers. So these are not the towers that are under consideration, but you can see the cameras look about like this. This is a close-up view. As you zoom out, you can see the placement of the cameras on this tower. And then as you zoom out even further, you can still kind of see the cameras. So I guess the point of this application or this illustration is that, these are cameras, they have minimal visibility. And even close to the tower, it's hard to differentiate that from the rest of the equipment that's located on a typical cell tower. So there are appeal criteria for any given appeal. And so we'll talk about each of these briefly. So the first criterion is approval of the appeal will not subvert the purpose of the standard or requirement. So the restriction on using cameras on wireless communication facilities was implemented due to privacy and surveillance concerns raised by community members during the public hearings held by the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners when the current cell tower regulations were adopted in 2019. And I know, Commissioner Kafalis, you were part of that conversation, so I remember those hearings very well. And there was concern expressed about surveillance and cameras for privacy purposes. So the applicant's project description state that the Pano AI team reviews the camera's view sheds and pixelates private properties where windows or driveways may be visible. So in order to retain privacy, they will pixelate, kind of private areas on private property. To maintain privacy, a proposed condition of approval is that access to the data collected by the camera shall be restricted to the property owner, public utilities, fire districts, and public safety officials. Also, another proposed condition of approval is to restrict the use of the cameras to Pano AI Incorporated and any successors if Pano AI is acquired by another company. An unrelated entity would need to file a separate appeal to utilize these cameras and/or install additional cameras on the towers. The application materials don't specify the number of cameras proposed, but it does appear that there are kind of a camera per side of any given cell tower. And so we do propose a condition of approval that there would be, that would limit the number of cameras to the minimum number to achieve 360-degree coverage with a maximum of 4 cameras per cell tower. The Development Services team concludes that approval of the appeal with the proposed conditions would not subvert the purpose of the standard, which is to protect public privacy. So next, approval of the appeal will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or property values in the neighborhood. It's the intent of the proposed cameras to enhance the detection of fires and disseminate information to responders with the goal of enhancing public safety. So we do find that it meets that criterion. Next, approval of the appeal is the minimum action necessary. The proposed condition limiting the number of cameras to the minimum required to provide the desired 360-degree coverage, not to exceed 4 cameras, is intended to address this criterion. So it's the assessment of the Development Services team that it would comply with this criterion with the conditions of approval proposed. Next, approval of the appeal would not result in increased cost to the general public. There's no evidence that approval of appeals would increase costs to the general public, so the proposal does comply with this criterion. And lastly, approval of the appeal is consistent with the intended purpose of the code. One of the objectives of the Land Use Code is to enhance public safety, while the prohibition against cameras on wireless communication facilities is intended to preserve public privacy. With the proposed conditions, approving the appeal to allow wildfire detection cameras on the existing towers would enhance public safety and preserve public privacy. This would be consistent with the intended purpose of the Land Use Code. So before I get into the findings, so we did receive some input from neighbors on the last application. That is the one at North County Road 41. So that person who I've communicated with is, kind of online and will provide comment by way of Zoom. I will not speak for her, but I'll say that she does have some concerns with this application. While there are concerns, I would also note that when this was sent out to referral, we did have comments in support of the appeals from the Emergency Management Director. We also have letters of support from 2 different entities. The Portland General Electric, which apparently has worked with Pano AI on similar applications. And then also, we have a letter of support from the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. So we do find that the proposal, as proposed, would comply with the applicable review criteria. We do have 3 proposed conditions of approval, which I mentioned, but I'll repeat them. So in terms of a recommendation, we do recommend that the Board of County Commissioners approve the 4 appeals listed on this slide, but I will not repeat them, subject to the following conditions. So first, to maintain privacy, access to the data collected by the cameras shall be restricted to the property owner, public utilities, fire districts, and public safety officials. Second, the use of the cameras is limited to Pano AI Incorporated and any successors if Pano AI Incorporated is acquired by another company. An unrelated entity must obtain a separate appeal approval to utilize cameras installed by Pano AI or to install new cameras. And lastly, the number of cameras shall be limited to the minimum number necessary to achieve 360-degree coverage, not to exceed 4 cameras. And we do have 4 suggested motions, 1 for each application, and the suggested motions refer back to the conditions and refer to the page number in the board packet where those conditions can be found. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Michael. Well done once again. Thank you. So colleagues, at this time, it would be appropriate to ask any questions or provide feedback to staff. Commissioner Commissioner Shattuck McNally, are there any questions you have for Michael or comments?
Thank you. So, we're kind of into new territory with AI and all these things. So my question is, when you say the use of the camera is limited to Pano AI, how long, do we know any ideas about how long they keep the data or the photos after, because once the day's over, if they don't see anything, is that kept or documented? Or how, do we have any idea of how they retain that information, or how it's kept or where it's at?
There are several representatives from Pano AI present, and I would let them answer that question because that has not come up during the review.
Okay, thanks.
Is there anything else, Commissioner Shattuck McNally? For staff?
I will wait for, if the Pano AI, they're going to present, then I'll wait for them. So that's what I
Yeah.
have. Thank you.
Yeah, there will be a full presentation and an opportunity for public comment and all the rest. Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
Yeah, Michael, you mentioned that one of the locations there were maybe unpermitted. Did you say that there were, or multiple
non-conforming?
towers and I don't know, can you just elaborate on what you had mentioned earlier about the one
Yes.
with multiple?
So at 740 North County Road 41, there are 6 towers. There's documentation in our records for permits for some. There are not permits for others. There is a zoning approval that actually I processed back in 2019, 2020 for another. They have been, so there's documentation in our records that we recognize those as non-conforming, even though we do not have complete records for when all of them were constructed. We do recognize them as being legal.
And so they're recognized as being legal, and the cameras will be on one of these ones that we maybe don't have official permitting for?
Correct.
Okay. Do we know how old they are, or is there any kind of concern structurally about those, or no?
I do not have complete information on that, no.
Thank you.
I do know that some are newer. So there was a replacement tower that was approved in, I believe, 2020. I don't believe that the camera is proposed on that particular tower.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner, and it seems like the applicants can certainly provide more detail. I think those are good questions. I would add on that, are there any other issues related to these non-conforming towers of that one location that we should be aware of?
Staff has no concerns with the towers as they exist.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Colleagues, any other questions for staff? So in a moment, just to remind folks, so the way this will work, once again, is we'll ask the applicant to come up to do a presentation. I will ask them how much time they need, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Staff can make note of any questions that may come up, and then we would open it up for public comment. But just to clarify, we're presenting on all 4 locations, and there was someone who was wanted to offer public comment on the last location. Are we going to just kind of check on each one of these before we move forward to make sure there's no public comment on the others, or how are we going to do that? I'm not clear, and maybe I'm missing something.
I guess you could ask if anyone is present in person and at which application they are concerned with. I don't know if there are other applications or other people online who want to
Okay,
comment on this application, or any of these applications.
And I don't know what the applicant's plan is to present theirs, but if they
Okay.
go all together, I think you can just ask if anybody has any comments on any of them, and
Okay,
then let them make their comment. The reason, you could theoretically say, this one I think is in a good location, this other one's in a bad location, or whatever the reason is. So that's why you sort of have to just do the site analysis in a separate way, but you could do public comment at the same time for all of them, I think.
yeah, that's helpful and it's important because typically, we'll open up public comment. We'll make sure that folks have an opportunity to provide their public comment, their testimony, and then at some point, if there are no other folks in person or via the remote option, we'll close public comment. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So with that, I'd like to welcome and invite applicants to come on up. And welcome. If you would be kind enough to introduce yourself, your relationship with the organization, and also I'm curious how much time you think you'll need to present.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. My name is Kat Williams, Williams, and I'm the Director of Government Development for Pano. And I believe between myself and my colleague Marianne, we'll need about 10 minutes.
Excellent, thank you. So folks can time that, and there's a little bit of flexibility, but it helps to provide a framework how much time. So please proceed,
Thank you.
Kat.
So good afternoon to you, Commissioners, to the staff, and to the community that's here today. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. As I said, my name is Kat Williams, and I'd like to take the next about 10 minutes to speak a bit about the background about Pano, what we provide, why it's relevant to Larimer County, and how it applies to our application. So prior to joining Pano, I was an operational wildland firefighter for about a decade with the Forest Service and the BLM. I worked on engines, hotshot crews, and helicopters, and spent 14 days straight sucking smoke in just the thick of it. And so I know well what it's like to be on the front lines and to have limited information to do my job. Now I'm with Pano, and our company is comprised of people like me, as well as some of the best with hardware, software technology, and operations. And our mission at Pano is to prevent catastrophic wildfires through early detection. And before I left operations, early detection usually came in the way of 911 calls saying, I see smoke over here. And then fire agencies would get dispatched to a general location. And so you hop in your helicopter, your engine, your buggy, whatever it is, and you try to find the base of the fire. And by the time you get there, you may or may not have the right resources to engage. And so you're going in somewhat blind. So in contrast, what Pano is trying to provide is this on-demand visual intelligence, and so that we can try to detect wildfires when they're early, confirm that it's something that the agencies need to be focused on, and disseminate this information very quickly so that they can ideally send the right resources to the right location. Now, Pano does this through a variety of different ways, but the high-definition cameras that we deploy are a big critical part of it. This helps to confirm intelligence that we get from AI detections. It helps to confirm satellite detections, as well as confirm intelligence that dispatchers might get from other local feeds like 911 Wildcat. And so you have this visual intelligence to confirm, yes, this is a wildfire. And then this data that we have is confirmed through Pano analysts will actually look at the feeds on the cameras to confirm, yes, this is smoke. And then from there, again, the agencies can send the right resources to the right location. And to give you kind of an example of how this plays out, there's incidents that have been happening all over Colorado, but on June 16th, it was Red Flag Day, and there was a fire that popped up. Now, the first alert came from Pano and went to Douglas Operations Emergency Management, and they were able to visually see that this was a smoke that they needed to be concerned about. They could also see on a map that Pano provided that this was in an area that wasn't accessible via road. And so they dispatched their helicopter, which was doing multiple bucket drops to put water on it right away. And then they dispatched 30 Forest Service firefighters that then had to hike in 2 hours to get on scene. And because of this early detection and rapid response, they were able to keep it to 3 acres. And these are the kinds of incidents that happen all the time that are success stories for wildfire detection technology like this. Now, we get asked all the time, well, what about privacy? We're not concerned about people's homes. We're trying to detect wildland fires. And so we take privacy very, very seriously. Before these stations go live, we do a hard pixelation on the camera. And what that means is not even anyone on Pano's side can see under that pixelation. So then we get asked, well, what if there's a wildfire that happens near there, or say the house sets on fire? We believe it's important to take that extra second or two for that smoke to rise above the pixelation for the AI to detect in order to protect people's privacy. And so these cameras that we deploy do not collect any audio. We pixelate all private properties so that what we're collecting as far as images go is pictures of trees and terrain, and it's meant to look for the first signs of smoke. And to your question, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, we hold on to the data because it gives our AI data to train on to know what wildfire looks like in different microclimates, different terrain, because what smoke looks like in Colorado might be different than Montana or Idaho or Wyoming. And so this data is really important to make it better. And so we're deployed all over the state of Colorado right now. We're going to be upwards of 60 plus locations by the end of this year. And this is a really important area that we're trying to protect. The 4 cameras in question are up on the screen right now. And I have my colleague with me here, Marianne Boring, who's going to speak more to the application at hand and the conditions that we have in place. Thank you very much. Did you have a question?
Why don't we continue with the presentation, then we'll have
Absolutely.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kat. Yes.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Marianne Boring. It's Boring. And I prepared my statements because I've got a lot to cover and not a lot of time left. And trust me, this is the best way. So forgive me if I'm reading a little bit. But we're pretty certain that the restrictive nature of your code by effectively disallowing Pano to install and maintain these wildfire detection cameras, it's an unintended consequence for a well-intended purpose, which is privacy, and we respect that. As Kat explained, Pano assures privacy is met with pixelation of our cameras, our camera views before the site is live and viewable by any of our customers or first responder organizations. The raw images are only seen by a few Pano internal employees to allow pixelation of any areas where individuals could expect and should expect privacy, and are thoroughly reviewed by another team before they ever go live and out to others. Cameras are all around us. They're in streets, intersections, highways, parking lots, shopping centers, stores, places of employment, many homes, and even probably your neighbor's home. To my knowledge, none of these cameras bear any restrictions to maintain privacy for their neighbors or for others. And I also want to point out that our pixelation is permanent. It's fixed. It can't be removed or messed with by anybody or any other type of program. So what you see is what you get, and it will always be that way. So that's important to point out as well. As the applicant, I know that we bear the responsibility to provide you the record and adequate information of facts to persuade you, the county commissioners, with a clear and convincing evidence to support granting these appeals. We also know appeal is required to meet certain requirements, so you have the ability to make findings of fact, and and we are confident that the responses we provided for your review to those 5 requirements will meet that basis for you to grant these appeals. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. On page 3 of your comprehensive plan, it is stated that Larimer County is in the business of safeguarding the public safety, health, and welfare, ensuring that development provides adequate services to residents, economical development, and preserving natural resources for future generations. Pano has these very same goals in mind, and the county will help the county achieve those with the installation of these cameras. On page 14 of the comp plan, I've highlighted a couple of sections there. I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but it goes on to remind us of the 2012 wildfire and that the 2013 flood that followed, and then jumps into how the county policies can positively influence the outcomes of these types of disaster events and looking for renewed approaches for risk management. But one section that really stood out to me the most was a sentence that reads, Larimer County is one of the most hazardous counties in Colorado for wildfire, and regulatory tools to protect the public have not been kept in pace with the increased risk. Well, with the granting of these appeals, Pano is definitely here to help. County staff provide an excellent staff report, so they've been great to work with too, by the way. And there are 3 conditions of approval that have been included in each one of these projects. Pano has no issues with complying with item number 2 and item number 3 in the condition. But we'd like to remove item number 1, please, due to its restrictive nature. On occasion, we do provide camera view access to the tower owner, as they are often not the property owner. This is in order for us to gain a higher and better vantage point on the tower for better view shed to increase the camera's performance and smoke detectability. The tower owners have also saved time and resources by having the ability to view the access roads to their facility to see if the snow has cleared enough for safe access to their sites. We also cannot be limited in scope as technology is ever changing, and who knows what these cameras may be used for in the future to predict weather patterns, or feeds could possibly be used for classroom projects, or even for college research. We've already seen these feeds used by local media and news outlets as a way to inform the public. As a way to inform the public, helping detect wildfires in their communities to help keep them safe and assured. With this condition, none of these items would be possible. Again, I'll circle back to the fact that there are more than likely no rules or restrictions on the cameras in your neighborhood. Pano has provided testimony and proof taking privacy seriously and professionally with the lengths that we go through for the pixelation of the cameras before the feeds are even broadcast to our clients and first responder organizations. So I thank you very much for your time. I make myself available for any questions that you may have. And I know there's already one question that was posed by Commissioner Stevens with regard to the structural integrity, I'm assuming.
So let's begin there. Thank you for your presentation, Megan and Kat. And Commissioner, do you want to offer your question again?
Yeah, it just seemed like that there was some concern about those towers, whether they had been permitted or whether we had information about them. So I just wonder if somebody can speak to that.
As far as the permit, if they were permitted before, if they were grandfathered in probably before there was an ordinance, that I don't know. But I can assure you that we do run at least a structural report or structural review of all of our sites before we install cameras.
Okay. That's good, because I just, I mean, if we were to allow cameras, we don't want them falling down.
Yeah, and also our cameras are very lightweight with the mount and everything is about 24 pounds.
Sure.
Are you good?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Shattuck McNally, questions or comments?
Yeah. So my first question is, how often is the maintenance or kind of inspection of these cameras? Are you on the property owners? Are you there once a year, twice a year? What's kind of schedule or what kind of work is required for that?
We don't really have a set schedule to answer your question, but very good question. It's usually if something goes down or maintenance, these are on high vantage points. We do get some bird business every once in a while. The cameras do have a wiping lens, but every once in a while we do have to get up there and wipe the cameras by ourselves. But typically I would say that one of our sites could be operational for a year and not have a requirement for any type of maintenance.
And then back to my question and concern about how long you keep the data. Am I, to just clarify, you're keeping the data in perpetuity? Okay. And that is in agreement that is used only for the purposes to necessary for, so that's just restricted, but it sounds like you're asking for more expanded uses.
We
for that?
are, just because right now it limits us to only providing the camera footage to property owners, which generally speaking, most of the towers that we are adding these cameras to, they don't own the property. So that's very restrictive for one. Plus also with the involvement of technology, there's certain to be other restrictions too that strict adherence to that condition could possibly make it difficult.
And can you explain, if they're not the property owners, who are the tower owners? We don't, they're not listed here. We don't know who those owners are.
Right. Unfortunately, yeah, the county assessor only tracks who owns the property. Most of them are owned by tower companies. Some are, large tower companies that's their business. They sell real estate on their towers for cellular antennas and other communication antennas, and now for wildfire cameras. Some of them are just their own repeaters. We have them on DNR sites. We have them on county facilities, city facilities. It just really kind of runs the gamut.
And then if they have access to that data, we don't know how and what they use that data for.
The data is, you mean as far as the tower owner?
Well, the tower owners, if we don't know who they are, we don't know what they're doing with that data.
Right, but it is all pixelated, so there is that element of privacy. Generally, what they're wanting it for is most of our sites are at very high mountaintops where we get an awful lot of accumulation of snow. So they found it very useful in seeing when the roads to their sites are open and accessible. So they don't have to send out a crew to go look and see, is it accessible to get to our site? So it saves them time, saves them resources, gas, etc.
I guess my last question for right now, with the changing technology that I'm always concerned about is going to get way ahead of us with AI, I'm always concerned we may not have enough conditions on this to kind of think about what this information and AI is going to be maybe using this for future things. So are there things that other jurisdictions that in Oregon that's in this letter that have they not put the conditions of approval and restrictions on this, that you make it sound kind of like you'd like to have less restrictions, but I still kind of concerned about privacy and how the pros, but definitely the cons of AI.
Very good questions. And we have almost 300 sites live and operational. And I can assure you this is the first time we run into this as being a restriction of not allowing cameras on cell towers. So we don't have conditions on any other sites or any other restrictions. It just happens to be in Larimer County at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, colleagues. I have two questions, I believe. One is regarding that map you showed us, the coverage area. What is the radius? How far out can one of these cameras see?
Honestly, it really depends on the view shed, tree obstructions, building obstructions, those types of things. Clear visibility, weather right now, visibility is not the greatest because there's so many fires around, so they're not able to see as far as they would under normal circumstances. But I would say generally they can see at least 20 to 30 miles, 40 miles.
What our standard is typically a 10-mile radius, and that's based off of a 100-meter smoke rise as well. And so when you look at the view sheds here, that's a 10-mile radius, and anywhere that you might see holes in a circle, that means that the smoke has to rise above 100 meters in order for that camera to detect.
That's interesting. Thank you. Thanks for answering that question. And actually, looks like I have a third question, but my second one is, could you once again restate your rationale for wanting, I couldn't hear it all, but the condition of approval number one, you want to remove that entire condition or just the reference to a property owner? If you could restate that, please, slowly, into the mic.
Not a problem, and I'm sure I was talking too fast, so I
No,
apologize.
it's okay.
Okay, we would like to have it removed to its restrictive nature. So because on occasion we provide camera view access to tower owners as they are often not the property owner in order to gain a higher and better vantage point on the tower for better view shed and to increase camera performance and smoke detectability. Sometimes they restrict us to lower elevations and we say if we give you camera
Who's
access,
they?
the tower owner,
That's okay.
they're selling the real estate
So
to
you
us.
guys don't necessarily own the tower.
No, we don't own any towers.
It would be the telecommunications company.
Correct. Go on.
Please go on.
Okay. This has resulted in the tower owners saving time and resources by having the ability to view the access roads to their facility to see how snow has cleared enough for safe access to the site. We also cannot be limited in scope as technology is ever changing. And who knows how these cameras may be used in the future to predict weather patterns, or the feeds could possibly be used for classroom projects and learning as well as college research. We've already seen the feeds used in local media and news outlets as a way to inform the public of these cameras helping to detect wildfires in their communities to help keep them safe, assured, and informed. With this condition, none of these items are possible. And that's
Thank you. That's helpful. And I'd be interested to hear from staff regarding the suggestion to remove that particular condition of approval at the appropriate time. My third question, I believe it's my final question, and that is regarding the one site that has a few cell towers, some that are non-conforming. Have you identified, I would think at this point you have identified which cell tower would potentially receive the cameras?
correct. Yes, we have.
And is it one of the permitted ones or one of the non?
I don't know.
d-
I don't know.
Shouldn't somebody know that?
We can work with staff to look at that.
Do we know that, Michael?
I do not know that off the top of my head.
And maybe it's not a critical thing.
But like I said, we do provide, at minimum, a structural opinion letter. A professional engineer does review everything to assure it's safe.
Okay, thank you.
Huh?
I don't have any other questions, colleagues. Anything else? Commissioner Stevens, please.
Yeah, and I don't think you went over this, but what happens when a new house gets built? Do you have, how often do you pixelate those, like, because, it's, people build new houses.
Yes, we work on an ad hoc basis. Basically, if someone notices something that isn't already pixelated, we can do it ad hoc. Once it's pixelated, it's not just one and done. It's constantly evolving.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you would all,
Thank you.
yes, appreciate the dialogue, the conversation. So now we will open it up to public comment. And I think we want to, if there's more than one person, we'll want to ask people if there's a particular location that they wish to offer comment on. But I think we can take the public comment as one section of the hearing. So let's begin first with here in person. So we do have one individual. Please, we have a couple of folks, okay? Welcome, sir. Please identify yourself for the record. If we need to get a spelling of your name, and I'd ask that you try to keep it to up to 3 minutes, please.
Absolutely. First of all, commissioners, planners, community, thank you. I'm here just as a local citizen. My name is Michael Hayden, Haydon. I am a 33-year wildland fire manager. I spent the first 16 years of my career as a smoke jumper, rapidly responding to fires, and the second 17 years of my career as an operations chief or incident commander on many of the large fires that we've seen up and down the Front Range and the West Coast. I was here for Cameron Peak. I was here for Mullen. I was on Grizzly and lots of the fires. I am here today. Also, since retirement, I work for Excel Energy, analyzing risk for wildfire potential. I'm here today because of the known threat that all of us live in, and I wanted to make a comment on public safety information, visual alerts, and sharing information, and the protection of life and property. I know that timing is everything. I've spent my career seeking information and accurate knowledge, and that is the kind of thing I see from this type of technology. It's not only a timestamp on when something happens, but it's a visual on what is it doing, where is it located, what is the surrounding weather doing, what do the local fuels look like, what might be other conditions. And I wanted to just state from a support standpoint that I firmly believe in this type of technology. Thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir. I believe there was a second hand. Come on down. I think you probably have figured out the routine by now.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. Hey, my name is Tim Amadon. I'm also I'm a resident in Larimer County, and I also work at CSU as a researcher. And so this is an area of research that I'm involved in, and so I'd like to just say I support as well AI wildfire detection just generally in support of the operational benefits that it provides to first responders and also to the utility companies and the emergency managers that need to make decisions. This is critical, timely information that can be mission critical in helping people make really time sensitive decisions. And then I'd like to speak to two of the conditions that were mentioned for the appeal. The first one is with respect to the sharing of information. So from like my researcher hat, having access to that data for whether it's like machine learning, pushing the cutting edge of what we can do with technology, we need to have access to these things in order to innovate on those from a research and science side. So that's really an important argument that I want to kind of add here. And I'd also like to speak a little bit to the number and to think a little bit about this as well. Actually, back to that first one as well. Another issue is I think it's good in some cases, in many cases, and maybe in perhaps in all cases, for there to be the opportunity for those data streams to be publicly available as well to citizens, if that's possible. And so there are platforms that do that. So that's one thing I'd like to think about, and Pano may move that way. They had mentioned, that there are cases where they like to provide that data already to the public and to news companies and whatnot. So I think, there are other platforms that do have that data publicly streaming already with pixelization as well on those things. So I think there is those kind of built-in privacy guards. I think that perhaps, to your point, Commissioner, deserves a little additional attention and respect in terms of considering what the privacy is and if there needs to be additional comment on that. If it is publicly available at all times, given that that's a condition that we have in the county that may not exist in other municipalities or governances. And then the last part I'd add is with the respect to the numbers, there are additional platforms that do exist. So with the limit of the number of cameras per tower, how would that handle if there's multiple platforms that want to install on a camera? If there's already existing infrastructure on a camera, would that forestall or limit the ability for other platforms to also offer that service? So, given that there's competition in the market, how do we build or think thoughtfully for that in the future? So those are just some questions I have or some perspectives to offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And is your first name Timothy?
Yes.
That's a good name.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record, and you have about 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Hans Rodvik. I'm the local area manager for Community and Government Relations with Excel. Just wanted to come here and voice my support, from a company perspective for what Pano AI here is trying to accomplish in Larimer County. Kind of echo Mike's comments in terms of this is a real focus for the company in terms of our enhancement and our security and safety of the residents and the communities that we serve throughout the state of Colorado. I apologize. The spelling of my name, Hans, H-A-N-S, last name Rodvik, R-O-D-V-I-K. We right now are in the process of filing and have filed our 2025 through 27 wildfire mitigation program. Working on setting up just a briefing with you all here in coming months. But the technology that Pano is offering is an important piece of that whole puzzle. Everything from vegetation management to AI detection, with these cameras for wildfire prevention is very important for us. So I was just talking with Mike. We have about 29 or 28 cameras right now throughout the state that are, monitoring and observing these instances and detecting, early onset detection like the Bear Creek fire was. We don't have any coverage right now in Larimer. So with the hopeful approval of these appeals, we can bring that coverage and enhance security and safety to the community. So just wanted to offer that and voice the support. Thank you all for what you do.
Thank you. And your first name?
Hans.
Oh, you're the fellow. You're the fellow
Hans.
who sends us all the emails from Excel.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Is there anyone else here in person who wishes to comment on these items that are before us? Then we'll go to folks online. We know there's at least one person. Jenny, shall we go with that individual and then go from there, please? Thanks. Karen, I think it is.
We've got Karen Salas. I do apologize if I got that name wrong. You're allowed to speak. Please unmute.
Hi, thank you. I guess I'm having questions about the
Karen,
Forest Service.
Karen,
Yes,
would you be kind enough to introduce yourself? And if there is a
sure.
particular file number that you're focusing on or location?
Yep. So Karen Salas, S-A-L-A-Z is in zebra. And I'm concerned specifically 0557 is the last four digits.
Thank you.
I guess one of my questions is the U.S. Forest Service Technology Systems has already deployed some surveillance system. Why are we turning to a private entity? And another one would be, is there going to be free access for the law enforcement, firefighters, the different organizations and departments? And then I know the FDPC has set standards for the cameras. So do these cameras meet those standards? And like some of the issues already discussed, I really would like to support condition number one. The one comment that the presentation included was who knows how they can be used in the future is very concerning as a property owner close to one of those cameras. And those would be the things issues I'd like to raise.
Karen, thank you very much for raising those issues. And there will be an opportunity for the applicants to respond. And I think we'll also call upon staff to offer their insights as well. Thank you very much, Karen. Is there anything else? You have a little bit more time?
No, I just appreciate all of your focusing on the definite public privacy concerns that these cameras are going to present.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Is there anyone else, Jenny, who has raised their hand through the Zoom platform?
No, there's not. I believe it's just another representative for the applicant who is online. So
Online? And you're certain that it is a representative of, the Spanish in me says Pano, but I guess it's Pano.
well, we can make sure. If anyone else online wishes to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand function or *9 on the phone.
All right, then. One last call for online or in-person public comment regarding the 4 items that are before us. There are no hands raised. Jenny, is that correct? Okay. Then we'll close the public comment period. And as these hearings go, the next would be an opportunity for the applicant to offer a response to some of the comments that were made. Megan, Kat, you folks are back on. And then we'll see if my commissioner colleagues, what questions we might have of staff. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the questions. So I think I got all 3 of them written down. If I'm missing anything, please remind me. So as far as a camera that the Forest Service has deployed, I can't speak to what the caller might be, which company they might be denoting. I can make assumptions, but the Forest Service would have had to purchase a private vendor's equipment in order to deploy it. They don't create that kind of technology themselves. So if I need further clarification on that, I can. As far as will fire agencies be receiving this information? Yes, there will be no charge to fire agencies to receive access to alerts. And then per the final question, it is kind of hard to say specifically in the future what the value of this technology will bring because as Professor Amadon mentioned, research is really important and we hope to partner with them in the future. But it's our mission at Pano is to prevent catastrophic wildfires through early detection. So if an entity or person is requesting this information for anything outside of that, that doesn't meet the mission, and we would look at that very critically. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to again remind, I mean, there are assurances with the pixelation of these for privacy for those persons. We pixelate doorways, driveways, any windows, things like that. Schools are pixelated. So there are assurances in place already with Pano being a professional company and being very sensitive to privacy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. We'll move on. So this would be an opportunity for us to ask questions of staff regarding what we've heard from public comment, as well as the applicant, Commissioner Shadrack McNally.
So I don't know if I should ask this of applicant or staff. So certainly there's a public benefit for putting up these cameras if they're not charging. And there's also lots of information being gathered. So I'm assuming, even though I know the intent is to prevent megafires, I'm working very hard on preventing that as well. How are they making money? What else? How are they selling, or who's paying for this if they're putting these cameras? Because they're very expensive cameras. Do you know?
Yes, again, Michael Whitley, Senior Planner. That conversation actually occurred. So we had that conversation internally when we were reviewing this application. And what we determined was that was not our staff's business in terms of asking, kind of who's benefiting from this. We look at what's being requested, the review criteria, and then we make a recommendation. Now, that's certainly within the purview of the Board of County Commissioners should they choose to impose a condition of approval, but we determined that as a part of that, we did not ask that question, and we determined that that was not part of our factor in reviewing the application.
Okay, so I will ask, if I can, Mr. Chair, ask that of the applicant, because the CSU researcher brought this up, that there's competition for cameras, so there might be more cameras coming. So obviously there's competition. That tells me there's something in it for these folks to do it. I understand everyone wants to prevent forest fires, but these things cost money. So I'd like to ask the applicant, because the door was opened, I'm going to go there.
So what is your question, please?
My question, sir, is how are you making money? How are you paying for all this? What's the profit off of this? Because you're a for-profit company, obviously. So.
Absolutely. And we have to take in money to continuously improve technology. And so the way that we go to market is we sell to a variety of different entities. It can be utility companies like Xcel Energy. It can be homeowner associations that aren't able to get insurance. And so they use Pano as insurance against wildfire. We sell to government agencies like Washington DNR, the Department of Natural Resources. They have 21 stations deployed in Washington to cover their high-risk territories. We sell to timber. We're deployed in Australia as well as Canada and work with telecommunication companies. And the thing with wildfires is they don't really care whether it's public or private. And so we have this collaborative approach where we're trying to protect all lands.
But you're saying you're selling to, you're giving to firefighting and agencies, and I'm assuming Excel has a contract, but also, if you're getting this permitted, but then turn around and charge the permitting agency for that data from the DNR, because I'm sure you said you didn't have to do permitting in Washington, so I'm just curious. These are probably long-term contracts and yearly fees, and I'm just curious about all of that. I mean, you don't have to say where, I'm just saying these are probably ongoing, and this is probably new and changing technology, but, I think there's a lot of questions here, because I don't really care that other places aren't doing this. We have residents who are concerned about their privacy and what cameras, and you can say you're pixelating all the time, but there's still that one time that maybe something gets captured that violates someone's privacy. And, people who live up in the hills do that for a reason. They want privacy. They don't want people over, watching them and things like that. So I'm trying to be sensitive to that as well.
I completely understand. This is a beautiful state, and there's a lot of wildland urban interface. And in order to protect that land, we hope that we can detect these wildfires early so that forested land can be protected in the future.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Kat. You have anything? I have a couple of questions for staff when we get
Yeah, I
there.
have a question for staff.
Please go ahead.
Okay,
Commissioner.
so, there's this ask for number 1 to be removed. I wonder if staff can talk about, what they think about that. I mean, could we just add some more entities to that, like, say, higher ed or, and the tower owner, and be in a better space? I mean, what does staff think about the conditions?
Thank you.
Because I do think the conditions address some of the questions that community members might have about privacy. And I also do understand that there are cameras in the Target parking lot and, in Old Town by the bathrooms and, a lot of other places. So, I mean, I think that, there are, but, these and I understand about the pixelation of the private properties, but I mean, I think that it's one thing to be in a public space and know that you don't have privacy. It's quite another thing to be in your home. And I hear the pixelation argument, but anyway, just if staff could just tell us what you were thinking when you created that condition.
Thank you.
Let me answer on behalf of Michael, and he can chime in. Staff would be hesitant to eliminate that condition as requested. If the applicant wants to, allow additional users to access to that, we could amend the condition to provide the tower owner as one of those possible resources. Staff wants to honor the original language that was put into the code that prohibits the cameras, and so limiting the access and limiting how these can be used felt to be pertinent and thoughtful to staff. This condition can always be amended in the future. Should some new use come up, they could come back before the Board of County Commissioners and request that Condition 1 get altered to include additional entities' access to this. So it can be changed in the future. And with that being said, staff wants to limit the amount of public access to these cameras as a means to privacy.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Yeah, and that condition was collectively drafted, so it was something that I put a first draft to, but then I did circulate it to the planning manager, the community development director, and county attorney staff, and this is what we came up with. I would note that during the presentation, or maybe it was during questions, there was mention of maybe selling data to HOAs. So with the conditions as proposed, and even adding the permission for use or access to the data to the tower owner, that would not allow selling data to homeowners associations or even insurance companies. So that's something that the applicant should be aware of, and also the board when making the final decision.
And if I can add just one more thing, based on what the applicant said with retaining the data permanently, you could restrict users to a certain amount of time available for the data. So they could only get 7 days worth of data or 14 days worth of data as another way to kind of qualify how they're allowed to share this information.
I mean, with the conversation coming up about selling, I mean, is that understood in the first condition, or should we add a piece around not being able to sell the data? Because it says that the data collected will be restricted, I guess, and cannot be sold, or I don't know if that's overkill, but I mean, if we want to implicitly say that we don't want sales of this data to happen.
I would actually like to hear from the county attorney on that. So we did craft that, condition with the term access, because as again, we did discuss, is it our business in terms of staff when we were putting together the condition, if the data is provided free or it's sold, and we decided that access to the data was what was important for our analysis, not the compensation for that access.
I think, and I give the same answer I give a lot of the time in these circumstances, which is, the aspect of what they're making money on, if you want to tie that in or condition it on that, you need to tie that to one of the criteria that you're reviewing. So to the extent that you feel like the amount of money they're charging or who they're selling it to changes your analysis in relation to those criteria about, is it detrimental to public health or safety, is it the minimum action necessary? All of those things, you just need to fit it into one of those criteria. I think we can rewrite it to say, include certain groups that they can, certain groups that they can't. And it sounds like we've sort of got a list of the prescribed people, but that's up to the board to decide if you want to limit it or how you want to limit it. But it's got to come back to those criteria.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have problems with the tower owner being able to see if their roads conditions are fine, but I mean, I do have some concerns of expanding it beyond that. And at the same time, like, I do understand the value of higher education and other folks having access to data because, there's a lot of sort of open data platforms and, I mean, as we try to be transparent in government, I think there's also a lot of practices where that is a best practice. And so I'm wrestling with this a little bit. I'll let my fellow commissioners have some questions.
So in the interest of trying to clarify some of what I'm hearing, Commissioner Stevens, one of the main thrusts of your comments is to keep that first condition of approval or perhaps expand it, or?
I think certainly keeping, I don't want to do away with it altogether. I think expanding it, I would be open to that, yes.
Let's see. I'd be interested. I think it would be helpful to ask the applicant if you want to come on up and respond or offer a comment. We typically don't open it up to folks who have offered public comment, so it's kind of between us. Yes, Megan?
Yep, we would be open to modifications of that condition of approval if appropriate, if that's what you would like. We're okay with that. We just want to make sure it's not as restrictive as it is right now. If we can get the tower owner to be part of that, and then also maybe news outlets, because these feeds will be shared with news outlets. Just to keep the public informed. Everybody wants to feel safe, and this is a good way to do that, to let people know that this technology is out there, to help keep them safe.
So you're suggesting the tower owner also could be added to this?
Yes, please.
And Kat, what do you have to say?
I would just advocate for universities.
Yeah.
Say it again?
Advocate for universities.
You mean for the research?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So there's discussion on the floor for adding 2 additional.
Well, they mentioned 3. They mentioned news outlets, universities, and
Okay.
tower owner, I guess.
And the tower.
Tower owner, please.
Are you? Well, it sounds like we're in agreement. We want to keep condition 1, and there's discussion about expanding what entities have access to the information. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
I mean, news outlets to me does get into a whole like, I can be Kristen, investigative journalist on YouTube, and be a news outlet. So I don't, that piece is, that can be so loosely interpreted these days as to give misinformation out into the public, which would not be beneficial. So I don't know what everybody else has to say, but that's the one
You're
I
not in
would,
favor of that one? You're in favor of,
I would want to put some parameters on it, and I don't even know how to do that.
okay, we're getting there, I think. Yes, Commissioner.
I'm very jumpy about news outlets. I feel like that could be anybody in the whole world. And then when we say universities, that could be any university in the whole world, and we don't know what they do with that data afterwards. They could sell it, they could use it, they could give it out. And so I just think every time we add something, I could see the tower owners, because they're probably trying to look for vandalism or for the roads. But I feel like every time we add someone, we're opening another opportunity for more folks to have access or charge or pay for things. And I just feel like the more people we add, the less privacy it happens. And I just think, and also I was thinking when they talked about competition, that means that other people can come do this same process and they can come back and amend. So I feel, since this is our first step forward onto this, I feel a little bit more conservative about it and a more prudent approach, that we can always, this is something that they could come back and amend if it really comes to that. I do understand about the public utilities and fire districts and public safety officials. But I do feel pretty strongly about keeping one in place. And I think every time we added a thing, the news agencies make me very, very nervous and concerned. So that's where I'm at.
Yep, I appreciate that. Certainly don't want to add to, there's a lot of nervousness out there. I'm hearing that, and I would support adding two categories. One would be the tower owners and research facilities. Is that something that folks are in agreement with? And it looks like we're keeping condition one as well as the other two conditions. Is that something? Yes, Commissioner.
I would only do research in universities if they have that condition that researchers are not allowed to then maybe sell or give that information. It's only to that entity and that research, and not because anytime the researchers are publishing, then that images are now public and out for that. So I feel like we have to be very careful thinking when we say researchers, then all that research is now public after that. So and they could be I don't know what they all would do with that data. So I just knowing that we are so behind the ball on this technology, I just very cautious about what gets out there. And I can hear the arguments. I know you're saying it's pixelated, but I can look at those pictures and still kind of imagine what I can see. I could still see homes in that picture. Even though the rest were pixelated, I could still see other homes being brought up. And so I'm just cautious of thinking about the privacy, because that was the intent of the land use code and that criteria and that comprehensive stuff. So I just don't want to stray too far from that. But I do see and support the public safety portion of this.
Thank you, Commissioner. I certainly can appreciate your caution. Jenny, can you help us navigate this a little bit?
Yeah, just one suggestion. If you wanted to keep the categories such as universities or add in news agencies, we could always add in a disclaimer subject to approval by the community development director, which would limit it from having to come back for a full amendment, but would still require some additional oversight.
Well, it sounds like, though, we are in agreement with cell tower owners. Is that correct, colleagues? And we're not in agreement regarding research facilities and, yeah, I think I get it, regarding news outlets. Yes?
I would support research, universities or research. Yeah, I mean universities, to be able to get this data, because I do think that what what they would largely do with the data would be help us, understand the data and maybe create more safe communities. So, and also there's a lot of ethics when it comes to researchers that, that they have to, but I actually like Jenny's suggestion about, saying, maybe including those entities subject to that way we have some control if it does get shared with any of those others.
So I think that's an approach moving forward. Can we agree that I also would like to see research facilities have access to the information? Is that something that is acceptable to folks, that we add two additional access categories to this condition of approval, one being the cell tower owners, another being research facilities? And that's a pretty broad term. I don't know if we need to define what that is, but I would be in support of that, but apparently we're not entirely in support. How would Commissioner Stevens, and then we'll go to Commissioner Shaddock McNally.
Yeah,
how would you like to proceed?
Well, that sounds good to me, and I actually like the language that Jenny proposed. So that said, subject to the
Approval.
Planning director's approval, so that we have some. So it isn't just Kristen Stevens University that I just made up, kind of.
And you might say educational and research institutions,
Yeah,
just
that's
to make sure we get that
that's
education.
Good wording.
So that particular category would be subject to the approval from the Community Development Director, and we would say education and research facilities?
I might suggest institutions instead of facilities, but
Oh, that's what I meant.
up to
yeah.
your purview.
Yeah. Okay. You good with that?
I would like to add accredited institutions. And we're not adding news agencies, correct? Because I'm really not comfortable with adding that. At this
Adding what?
news agencies.
We are not.
Okay, so I can add cell towers and then have
What Jenny said.
but I'd like to add accredited because I think
Yes,
that's important.
what Jenny and Commissioner Shaddock McNally said. Okay, we're almost there, I believe. So when it comes, yes, Michael?
Oh, I just wanted to, and I didn't want to interrupt at this point, but
You
I
got to
wanted
talk into the mic, Michael. You're a soft-spoken chap.
Yes, sir. So I just wanted to circle back, and I didn't want to interrupt necessarily at this point, but I did look through our records. There are 5 planning records and 6 permits on record for this property related to cell towers. None of them are for a 75-foot tall tower, which, again, this is proposed, these cameras are proposed on the property on North 41st, County Road 41, on a 75-foot tower. We have no record for a 75-foot tower, but that does not necessarily mean that it is not a permitted tower. So just to answer Commissioner Stevens's question specifically about, do we have a zoning approval or a permit? It does not appear that we do for this tower. However, planning staff does not have a concern with that from a zoning perspective, because we recognize that this is a property that historically has had cell towers with poor record keeping, apparently.
Michael, thank you, and Matt for following up on that, providing us with that information, answering Commissioner Stevens' questions. So I think we can now move into deliberation, and when it comes time to offer a motion and subject to conditions of approval, I'm going to ask our planning manager to slowly and clearly state that revised condition of approval. So we are now in the deliberation phase, which means we offer our thoughts on where we're at with these proposals. But we'll begin with, let's see, Commissioner Shaddock McNally. How about you?
Thank you. First, when Michael brought that up, and that information, Michael, that obviously there is a tower there that hasn't been permitted. I'm just wondering if we should document that it's there, and maybe we need to go find out what other towers are up. I feel like if there's towers that we don't know about that other cameras were trying to get on, I just want to say to staff, I don't know if we need to go ahead and document that tower there somehow and have it, checked out, because if there's all these towers out there that we're not aware of, even if this site's known for a lot of towers, I don't know if we have a condition or a thing in the land use code that says only so many towers per these locations. So I'm just curious, because that is concerning to me, that you say all the ones we have are not 75 feet. So we're obviously approving this camera on a tower that we don't know about or is not recorded. So I just want to kind of get that kind of cleaned up or investigated. And for me, it just feels a little weird that
Certainly,
we're
yes.
approving something for a tower we have no knowledge or record of. So it
Yes.
makes me ask that question, what else is there? And that makes me concerned, because then maybe there's cameras there that we don't know about either. So I'm just saying, it just makes me nervous. I'd like to know. So Mr. Chair, I needed to say that because I'd like to have that addressed.
And I would like Michael Whitley to address that or respond to your concern.
Yes, and I acknowledge your concerns. This has come up several times over the last 16 years that I've worked with the department. This is a known parcel with, kind of incomplete records. I would state that I don't think that we do know what is on the property in terms of the number of towers and the buildings, because that has been documented through other zoning processes. For example, in 2020, I took what was called a minor special review at the time. We no longer have that process, but I took a minor special review to the Board of County Commissioners for a new tower. There's also been a location and extent approval on this property for a separate tower. Those applications document other existing towers, other existing buildings. It's just that we do not have zoning approval documents for those or permit records. So we could look into, kind of further research, but this has been looked at several times. I don't know that we're going to find anything new in terms of the record, but I'm confident that there are not new towers just kind of popping up. It's just that what's there has not been previously documented, but we are documenting things as they come forward today.
Well, it would be great just for me if we could clean that documentation up and concise it and have it so that when we ask that question, is there a 75-foot tower there, we know that or something, just for my thing. So obviously, for deliberation, wildfire is a big thing for me. I'm live in unincorporated Larimer County in a wildfire risk area, and so I know, this is stuff I talk about every week. And anytime we can prevent the next mega fire and have early detection, especially when it comes to our infrastructure. And I appreciate Excel being here and your guys' communication during the Alexander Mountain Fire, and your extreme hard work and collaboration and protecting critical infrastructure. And so I know that's really important, and it's also your investment and your assets. I get that, but also it's public safety. So I think this is really important. I know we have a wonderful letter from Vaughn Jones, who I know well with my work with the state, and I appreciate that letter of support, because that carries a lot of weight with me. I'm really pleased my colleagues agreed with me on keeping item number 1. I think that this is new territory, and I'm just feeling a little cautious and prudent steps for how this goes forward. So I can, and I hope the person who called in feels that we have addressed some of their concerns about privacy and things like that. So I do feel this is important going forward. And I think that they have met some of the criteria, especially with the conditions of approval. I feel a little more comfortable with these appeals, and I will support that with the conditions that we added on, and I'm okay with the addition of the 2, long as that wording is very clear. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to clarify, you said you feel like some of the criteria have been met. Do you mean all of the criteria have been met? Because all have to be met. with the conditions of approval.
Yes, sir, I understand what you're asking me.
Okay.
And the ones that, I guess my statement I will amend, since we're going to be precise here, that the conditions of approval that I did not feel were being met have been addressed now with these conditions of approval and the additions. And so I feel that with that conversation and with that keeping condition one and clarifying that I am comfortable that these are all met at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for clarifying. And we are charged with basing our decision on the review criteria. And so at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, in our county and in our country, we're always kind of weighing safety and privacy. I think that happens a lot. How do we keep our communities safe, but also maintain that privacy that people desire? And clearly in criteria A, this criteria was made because we heard surveillance, concerns and privacy concerns when we adopted these regulations for wireless communication facilities. So, we want to honor that in our community because it's something we've heard that time and since then as well. So, but I feel like we struck the right balance here because I think this is an important safety condition. And we have a lot of people who deal in safety and first responders that have supported installing these cameras. So I will support this. I do think it meets all the criteria, and not only is it not detrimental to public health, I think it will improve public health and safety in our communities. So I am in support of these applications or these the appeals, and I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I too will support there are actually 4 applications. We'll get to that. But I do believe that the 5 review criteria have been met. Our Community Development Department has recommended approval, and certainly don't want to diminish the input that we got from the public in support, and also questions raised by Karen up there at the top of Risk Canyon Road. I think that's also equally important, and hopefully we've done a good job of addressing privacy concerns. So yes, I support this application. I believe the criteria have been met, and I appreciate that we've been able to come to some agreement about the conditions of approval, in particular condition number 1 with some of the revisions. So with that, let's see, I think we have to do 4 separate motions. Mr. Haug, yes, sir.
I think you could probably do one motion and just say I move to approve and then list the names of each one out.
Okay,
If we were going to approve some and not approve some or put different conditions on all of them, then I think you'd have to do it separately. If you're going to put the same condition on all 4 and approve all 4, I think you can just make one motion, but list out each one.
thank you. Thank you for that suggestion, Frank. So before we go there, and I will ask Commissioner Shattuck McNally to offer that motion, Jenny, would you slowly but surely, it's kind of how I run these days, if you would please tell us the exact wording that we agreed upon regarding condition number 1.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, and this condition will apply to all 4 cases. So,
Thank you.
condition 1, to maintain privacy, access to the data collected by the cameras shall be restricted to the property owner, public utilities, fire districts, public safety officials, and telecommunication tower owners, period. The data may be shared, accessed by accredited education and research institutions, subject to the approval by the Community Development Director.
Thank you, Jenny. That's helpful. Mr. Haug, is that legally correct? Okay. So colleagues, Commissioner, would you please offer the motion?
So Frank, I'm going to look at you while I read this. So I move that the Board of County Commissioners approve the following appeals, subject to the three conditions just stated by Jenny Axmaker. These four locations: 13938 West County Road 18, Pano AI Appeal, file number 24-GNRL 000554. 9375 Gold Mine Road, Pano AI Appeal, file number 24-GNRL 0555. 3519 Minuteman Drive Road, Pano AI Appeal, file number 24-GNRL 0556. And 740 North County Road 41, Pano AI Appeal, file number 24-GNRL 0557.
Thank you, Commissioner. Frank, give me a thumbs up or what?
That sounds good.
Okay, then I can say with full confidence that that is a proper motion. Any further discussion, colleagues?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Good luck. Colleagues, before we move on to the final discussion item, is there a need to take a 5-minute break to stretch or you're good, Commissioner? How about you, Commissioner? Okay, we'll just keep moving right along. The next item, that's right there. We'll just, this has to do with proposed amendments to the land use code. We have our esteemed principal planner, senior,
Principal.
been around a long time planner. Man, please take it away from me right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Kafals. Appreciate that. This last item on your agenda, item number 4, are considered to be the 2024 code amendments to the Larimer County Land Use Code. There are 16 different code amendments that are assembled within your packet, which begins on page 354 and goes on till page 411. It's my understanding that you all would like to hear a couple of items, but not necessarily all 16, as they've been presented to you previously at work sessions, and there's been discussions around those, but for purposes of having an open discussion and understanding the code amendments, I heard that you would like to hear testimony regarding accessory living areas, tiny homes, the definition of family or living unit within our code, and I would like to just briefly touch base on home occupations and rural occupations, as that was an open discussion at the Planning Commission. So unless there's other items that you want to hear from, I'll just go through those 4 items, and then once complete, you can make a motion appropriate.
Matt, thank you very much. I believe your understanding is accurate. Just to confirm, colleagues, the 3 items that we identified this afternoon, and in addition, a little bit more in-depth presentation of the matter of home occupations and all of that, because that's certainly been a big issue. Take it away, Mr. Lafferty.
Thank you so much, Chairman Kafals, Commissioners. Matt Lafferty, Principal Planner, Larimer County Planning Department. Item number 1, the first amendment that was being proposed is an amendment to Article 3 of the Land Use Code pertaining to accessory uses, those uses being home occupations and accessory rural occupations. Currently, Larimer County allows those types of uses within the county as a use by right. We just the property owner can come in, understand what the rules and regulations are, and operate a home occupation. That's the preferred sense of how operations should occur. What we've understood over the years with home and rural occupations is that many property owners believe they have a right to operate certain levels of businesses in Larimer County, but they fail to come in and understand the rules and regulations. And they just go ahead and they start operating something out of their home. And what we believe, as currently stated in our code, is that having a registration certificate would help us, primarily our code compliance office, to work with property owners when we receive complaints. So if somebody calls up, files a complaint, my neighbor's operating a business on their property next door, and we know nothing about it, we have to go through a process of trying to understand what that person's doing. Are they operating within the limits of the law? Do they know what the limits of the law are? And usually that can create some consternation between neighbors, and we would prefer to avoid that. And one way we believe that would be a healthy way to avoid that is to require a home occupation certificate or a accessory rural occupation certificate, where a landowner comes in and says, hey, you know what, I want to have a small business on my property and I believe I can meet your rules. I'll fill out this registration certificate, which is just one page, which says, I understand your rules and the limits of which my business can operate on my property before considering it a permanent or a large-scale business that requires a permanent location somewhere else. And in doing so, if we got a call from a property owner that said, hey, my neighbor's operating this business next door, we would be able then to send that registration certificate to that person and say, they've told us that they're operating this business in compliance with our rules. If you can demonstrate to us why they're not operating within the rules, then we'll investigate it. But we don't need to go creating a situation between property owners. That's one potential reason for doing it. The other potential reason is just to make sure that our landowners and our property owners out there that want to operate a business understand what the limits of their operations can be on their property before they start operating, preferably such that they don't operate beyond the rules and we don't have to have a code compliance case opened up on them, which often creates anxiety for property owners. And so we would ask that the code be amended to take the registration certificate that currently says is a option and make it a requirement. Now, we know that there's going to be property owners that just will open up their business and start operating, and we're not going to be punitive on them. We would say, you know, if they came in and we did get a complaint and they hadn't reviewed one of those or provided one of those certificates, we would just say, hey, these are the rules, and if you operate within the limits of the rules, please sign this certificate that you understand them, and then they would be back on their merry way and be able to operate their business from their home. At the Planning Commission level, there was a substantial amount of conversation about bothering people and creating this issue of, you know, geez, these business owners are going to have to fill out a whole nother piece of paper and they're going to have to go get this and they have to do that. And, you know, we understand that operating a business is a complex operation. And it does often require licensing and other things. The county doesn't require licensing, and so we don't know when people are operating businesses or when they change their businesses or do anything. And this would just be an opportunity for us to make sure that we're working with property owners to make sure that our rules are being done. We don't want to be punitive with this system. We do not want to cause a bunch of paperwork for people. I showed the Planning Commission when we were there. Here's what the form looks like. It's one page. It just asks a few questions. How many employees do you have? What are your traffic thresholds? Those types of things that outline what the rules are. And if they say yes to those things and they sign it, then they're indicating that they'll be in operation consistent with our rules. So with that, I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and open it up for conversation with you all.
Thank you, Matt. Colleagues, questions or comments, Commissioner?
Thanks, Matt. And I could see this could be really a great way to alleviate some, like you said, neighbor conflicts. So my question is, when does, a lot of these are rural properties that are zoned a certain way, and some of these businesses expand. So when does that property zoned residential, if they're actually doing a lot of business off that property, when does it become a commercial business? And then change that property into a different assessment rate? And will they be educated on zoning that if there's industrial kinds of things, which I know is happening because I've seen it, what, you know, what I'm saying is this a chance for us to avoid some of those things, conflicts with the county as well? I'm just curious about
Sure.
that.
Sure, great question, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. Yeah, the home occupation and accessory rural occupations, and they're separate sections in the code because one addresses rural properties and one more urban level properties. When it outlines what the level of operation is for those types of operations. So if you're going to operate one, you're only allowed a certain amount of vehicle trips, and you can only have so many sales events, and you can only do certain things. And so it sets those parameters. And so filling out that form and talking to our staff at the beginning of a process, we're able to outline what those limits are so that they know that once they hit that threshold, that they're going to have to make a decision on their property. Do I expand my business more? And if so, I'm probably going to have to relocate to a property that's zoned commercially or industrially where I can operate it within the limits of the law. Or in some cases where somebody's already expanded and operated outside of those limits and we've received a code compliance case, we can back them down to that limit where they're legal, or they're informed that they can find an alternate solution by relocating. There is a third alternative, and that's, of course, property owners could come in and request to rezone their properties. But that would be to look at a different level of operation and how would they fit within the context of their neighborhood or the area that they're located in. So yes, it would be beneficial to express those rules and requirements.
And therefore, maybe through education and being proactive, we can help some of these folks know, like you said, the limits so that they can stay within compliance and understand kind of the I don't know, the menu of options, but also the playbook just to make sure they can do this with.
Do so successfully.
Okay.
And I think it's important for us to understand that, Larimer County, in my history, has always been supportive of business when it's operated in the proper location or at the proper level. And that's what we want. We want to support these businesses and we want to see them thrive.
Great. I appreciate that. Thanks I'm just curious because I know I had this question asked of me. And so I thought, well, I wonder when I know that was in the code, but there is that threshold where it would kind of start that process to do that. It has to be something different.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering my question.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. Just appreciate the spirited debate that the Planning Commission had about this. And I understand the arguments about, having more requirements and filling out more paperwork. But on the other hand, we've also all had situations where neighbors have been really concerned about what kind of activities are happening in neighborhoods. And sometimes the kind of traffic that are going to and from a building or kind of what feel like activities that wouldn't be allowed in a residential neighborhood. And so I think this really kind of helps with that process. And so I am supportive of this, but I appreciate all the efforts that Matt, that you did and the conversation that that our Planning Commission had about it.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I kind of share a little bit that, we're asking one more thing for small business owners to do. So I'm curious, how are we going to enforce this? And that's one question. And the second question is, the way we've had it now, it's not been required, it's been voluntary. What kind of compliance have we gotten at this point, or do we have that kind of information? And how do we think requiring this will improve that, and how do we enforce it?
Enforceability is always a big issue, and Amy's here, and I was going to bring her up in a few minutes. But in the past, we've received numerous applications where people have come in and filled out the registration form and given us that, and we have a book of records and whatnot. It will be people that come in and ask the question, what can I do on my property? How can I operate this business? That we're going to get that registration form filled out. If they don't come in and do that, The only other way that we're going to get that filled out is when we do receive a code compliance request and we have to approach a property owner. At that time, if they're operating within the limits of the law, we'll just ask them to fill it out.
So if I may, before Amy identifies herself and offers some insights, and that was another thought I had, Matt, and I think you've addressed it proactively. So one of the benefits, potential benefits of having folks register their home occupation is it might prevent any issues down the road with certain kinds of code compliance. And so that's a benefit. I'm understanding. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Yes, Ms. White, who are you?
I am Amy White, and I'm the Code Compliance Supervisor here at Larimer County. And as Matt said, what we're looking for is just a baseline information so that we know if they're exceeding what they told us they're going to do. It's easier for us to be proactive at that point and bring them either back into compliance, suggest a new location, or to have them go through whatever planning application process they would need. I think one of the concerns that the Planning Commission had was that we were going to go knocking on doors, and that is not the case. Obviously, we don't have time to do that. But these complaints that do come in where people are operating the businesses and we know they're operating, those are the ones that we're hopefully going to catch proactively on that side so that we know and they know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. So it's not going to be a blanket, okay, everybody, you need to come in and register your home and rural occupation.
So that's helpful. Just, if I may, just a couple of quick follow-up questions, and that is, I think you might have referenced this, Matt. There's a few simple questions. What does this registration application look like? Because folks going through the land use process or the building permit process, I believe there are a lot of applications or forms. So is this an easy one? Is it 3 pages, 10
Yes,
pages,
Commissioner,
1 page?
It's a one-pager, and it just says, what are you doing? How many vehicle trips do you have? How many employees are you going to have? So just some baseline information that we're trying to gather, but it's a one-page form.
It asks about the nature of their business, really. And then the questions that are asked that Amy was alluding to, those questions are actually asked to show that they are compliance to the code. So the code says you can only have so many vehicle trips per day. And so we ask how many vehicle trips you're generating, and then they tell us that. How many employees can you have? And then they tell us that, and then we can look and see if they're actually in compliance with code.
And then that form will be uploaded into our the InterGov app so that it can be tracked by that parcel so that everybody has access to that information.
So, sorry.
You're all right.
So what was the stakeholder process with coming up with this particular one, which certainly folks in rural areas might have questions about? And also, how are we going to market this or outreach this? How will small business owners or home occupation people know that if this gets approved, now they have to fill out a simple one-page questionnaire?
As a code modification, identifying rural or even home occupations or rural occupation users was impossible because we don't have a running list of them other than the ones that have already filled out the form. So, and here, Michael, thank you so much, Michael, for pulling up the form as we currently have it on there. So you're correct. How do we market this or get this out? I think our best information is going to be to work with Michelle in the commissioner's office and the county manager's office to see if we can get a press release out on this and maybe to post something on our social media sites to get something out on that. But the page on your left shows what a home occupation certificate looks like, asks for a date, parcel number, property address, owner information, a description of the home occupation. It asks 5 questions talking about buildings, square footage of the occupation, because those are things that are outlined right in the regulations. And then an acknowledgement that the property owner understands the rules and that they've contacted other agencies that might be interested in this, like the fire department. Because we've had people that maybe operate a welding business or something that has gases or things associated with it, and we want to make sure that they've talked with those agencies to make sure that they're operating safely. And then they just sign it. That's really the gist of this form.
Okay,
And
yes.
if you remember, Commissioner, this was one of the suggestions that we came up with in the assessment that we did a year ago. And it was one of the suggestions that would help us enforce more effectively and efficiently. So that's the reasoning behind it.
Thank you. And I still have a few reservations, but I think this conversation has been helpful. I suppose my last comment might be, so how do we know this is actually working? Are we going to evaluate it in a year? I mean, how do we know that we're actually helping to be proactive on the county side, but also supporting small business folks so they can be successful in their endeavor?
Yes, we were happy to track that. I think just with the same as all the 8 suggestions that we did make in the assessment, that we will continually be looking at those to make sure that they are actually having an effect, a beneficial effect on code compliance and what we're able to do. So all of these things that we're working on right now will be reviewed and evaluated.
And I would trust your judgment, but perhaps you could give some thought to, would we have enough information or data to look at this in 6 months, or are we talking about 9 months or a year? And I'll leave that up to you folks. I would like to put some that we're actually going to kind of have a follow-up discussion.
So we will be coming to you guys at your September 23rd work session to let you know where we are in the scope of things as far as what we've done with each of these assessments. And as part of that, Commissioner, I don't know if 6 months we would have enough information yet, but maybe at 9, certainly at a year, but we can track that happily.
Thank you for entertaining my questions. Commissioner, yes, please.
Commissioner, I would really advocate for at least a year of a collection. Code compliance is so busy and has so much going on. And now with the Alexander fire on top of all of this, I think giving them a year to collect this data with understanding that they're just such a small department, I just think 6 months is too much. And I would strongly advocate for a year. And I think that we should have that discussion as a board.
If you'll recall, I left it to your judgment to decide when. So I don't want to have a discussion about 6 months or a year. I trust in your judgment. You make the call, and September 23rd is probably not enough time. That's what I would ask.
Right. All right. Any more questions for me? All right.
Shall we go on to the next?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Second item, accessory living areas, as we call them here in Larimer County. Some of them call them accessory dwelling units. Just to say, I think we're a bit ahead of the curve as it relates to the state. This year at the legislature, the state legislature was looking at housing opportunities and things for affordable housing and whatnot, and they passed new legislation that said in certain parts of our communities, accessory living units will become a requirement. You can't prohibit them. They did set limitations on the size of what an accessory living unit in those locations would be and where those locations would be. So they would be inside of a established metropolitan planning organization area with a certain population and whatnot. And in looking at that definition and those things, the county was not responsible to fit within the state's regulations as it relates to ADUs or ALAs in our terms. So we were ahead of the curve. We were thinking that it would probably be best from our perspective, because we don't see a lot of our applications get denied on these things or whatnot, was to make these a use by right throughout the county, with the exception of one location. And that location is in the Estes Valley planning area that is in the unincorporated portions of that area. And that falls under a separate section of our code, and therefore we need to vet it up there. There seems to be some people that believe that maybe that's not a good idea in the Estes Valley area. There's other people think that it's a great idea. Currently, the town of Estes has changed its regulations, and they now allow detached accessory living areas up there. We allow them in the county. We're going to try to make them with this a code amendment, a use by right. They just have to come in and get a building permit, comply with the rules and whatnot. As it relates for the unincorporated areas of the Estes Valley planning area, they are currently allowed to have an ADU as long as it's attached to the primary dwelling. So there is an opportunity there. What we will be doing is looking at ADUs from the standpoint of, if we study them in that area, from the standpoint, do they want to allow them on a detached basis? And so hearing that there is some issue up there, some people would like to have them, some people would not like to have them. We think that it's probably better for us to have an open code amendment process up there and have a stakeholders group meeting and whatnot, and reach out to the community to see what the real voice is on those items. But for ours, and then we'll go to questions for ours, it is to just allow these as a use by right in the county through the building permitting process. There will not be a planning process for these unless there is an ALA that is going to exceed the square footage limits in an existing dwelling. If it's in an existing dwelling, maybe there's already a house on the property or a small cabin or something like that, small dwelling, and they build a new house and this one exceeds the requirements, the community development director has the right to allow that to occur if they can demonstrate compliance with our code on that. The only other option would be if they want to exceed the size limits for the building of a new one, they have to come through the appeal process, and the appeal process would be heard by you all. And with that, I would open it up for conversation.
Thank you, Matt. Commissioners, questions or comments? Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Couple of things. First, we have blanket no short-term rentals allowed in any of these, correct? For accessory, I just want to clarify because I get a lot of questions about this right now. For if it's used by right, they're not allowed to be used for short-term rentals, and that is also with the Estes Park, correct?
That's
I just
correct.
want to be very clear
Yep.
because that has been a question, and everyone's getting very worried about that. So right now they are not allowed to at all to be used for short-term rentals. Secondly, when we just got done with these accessory living dwelling units used by right, but if that person moves in, start a home occupation business, those same rules would apply. Are they allowed to do the business in the accessory dwelling unit?
As long as it's the principal use of the property that's doing it. So if I own the home and the property and I'm living there, in my primary dwelling, I can have a home occupation on my property. It doesn't say what buildings I can do it in, just as long as I'm operating consistent with the rules. So I could have my home occupation, and maybe the accessory living area is in a barn. I'm just going to use that as an example because we've seen those where the upper floor of a barn or a large garage is used for the accessory living area, and maybe below I have some small home occupation type business. I'm allowed to do both of those because they're considered permitted accessory uses.
And then when you talk about use by right, and I'm aware of this because I have a building envelope, add-ons or adding a second building, there's some of these properties have building envelopes.
Mm-hmm.
They have to stay within that building envelope, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And so some of those building envelopes don't allow for maybe even more restrictive than the size things that are on the criteria. So what is that pathway? I mean, that's a whole nother process to exchange a building envelope, correct?
Right.
Or is that harder to do?
If they really wanted to exceed and had to put it inside a building envelope, then they would potentially have to do that. It's a great question, Commissioner Shattuck McNally, that maybe I need to touch base on this one issue because when you go to get a building permit on these, that's going to be the new process. There's going to be some things that you have to demonstrate in that process. One, you have appropriate location to place it on your property, either within setbacks or within a building envelope. If that building envelope, let's say in your case, as you're discussing, is encumbered by other buildings, or let's say you have a septic system and it has a leach field and you can't build there, and you're all of a sudden confined. Those are things that are confine your ability to place it on your property. Water is another good equation. Some districts don't let you put an accessory dwelling unit on, or an ALA on a existing tap. They make you get a separate tap. Some of them are on wells. How is the State Division of Water Resources going to allow you to operate on a well? And so we're going to require that when you submit your building permit, that you answer a lot of those questions, and preferably that those are answered long before you go down the process of designing an ALA on your property, because those can be some expensive propositions, and we don't want people to spend money where they don't need to.
Well, exactly. And that's kind of the process of my question is, let's say, septic system, homes, a ditch that's very large that does not allow buildings within a certain much, the building envelope. I know exactly, I'm 6 inches from that line, so I know what I can't do. Then also driveways and access, and then is it septic? I know septic systems are also designed because of the location and near water, and so there's a lot of those questions. I hate for someone we've had this come up before, where someone gets really down the line and is asking and paying for fees and things, and all of a sudden they get to here and we're like, this can't happen. So I just, when we say use by right, most people in the general public, that says to them, I can do whatever I want. And I just want to make sure we're really clear about what that means, because just like farming by right. And so that's why I'm asking, because I hate for someone to get involved in this process and find it's going to be really hard and a lot of money to go through this process to get what you want to do. But if you just, you know what I'm saying? I'm just concerned about that. And so I just want to understand what this all means, because when I hear use by right, and I know if I said this to my neighbor, that means something way different for me versus him.
Again, this is a wonderful question that you asked. And so to hedge that off, some of our staff have had this conversation. What are we going to do? Right now we have a process that they got to step into to start answering a lot of those questions. The code still has those requirements in it. We are creating a handout. A couple of our staff members are creating a new handout that we will have available. So when somebody comes in, and we're hoping that people engage us early in the process, and they come in and they say, you know what, I'm going to put an accessory dwelling on my property. What's expected of me? We can give them that handout, discuss it with them. And in that handout, it should identify that, you need to talk to your water provider. You need to understand sewer. Where can you place it on the property? Those types of things, so that they engage those questions before they spend a bunch of money designing something that they cannot build.
So, because there are certain properties that this may not be possible.
Yep, absolutely.
So I want to state that publicly.
Yes. A use by right does not mean that it's always possible.
Right. So I want to state that publicly. So because I've had this conversation with a lot of folks, and I think that's the same thing with up in Estes Park. We have fire risk, we have water, we have fire. I mean, all those things that have to come into play. And that's why it just makes me I have lots of concerns in this conversation. So
duly noted.
I appreciate you let me kind of talk and have a dialogue with you. But I mostly want to do this for the public too as well, because I do think we have to be set expectations as well. So
yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, any questions or comments? I think I have one comment, perhaps. Yes, thank you. I believe it's a question, and that is, could you remind us the motivation for this particular proposed land use code amendment to make it easier to create accessory living areas? I seem to recall, but you know how that goes, that it was a recommendation when we did our affordable housing assessment that this might help to address some of that. Could you speak to that, sir?
Yes, sir. And I think it's come up in many different forms, but you're correct, Commissioner Kaffalis. Most recently, it came up at the planning level when we did a code assessment for housing. how is our code reacting to affordable housing or housing attainment and those types of issues? And the consultants that we brought on board suggested that ALAs maybe should be considered a use that's not restricted by an application, because it's better to spend those fees on putting, energy into what you're proposing to do rather than to having us review something that we're likely to support if you're meeting all of our rules anyways. And so it came out of that, it came out of the housing assessment. I think it was in there. This has been dialogued for a couple of years down at the state. Housing in Colorado is highly expensive and everybody's looking for an opportunity. And last year it didn't pass, a year ago it didn't pass some of the muster, but this year it did. So it's been on everybody's radar. The county is just a little bit ahead of the curve on this, and I think it was a good thing.
Thank you, Matt. That's very helpful. Let's move on now to the next item that you were going to talk about.
Somewhat related to this issue, but not necessarily entirely to it. Eric Freed from our chief building official has worked for a number of years down at the state addressing things called tiny homes. We've had that subject floating around for many years. Tiny homes are a part of our community that we're trying to best understand. And so I'm going to invite Jared Say from our planning staff. He was the lead planner on this subject matter. I worked with him on that and am grateful for the findings that he's had. And so, Jared, would you please address this issue for the commissioners?
Absolutely. My name is Jared C. I am a planner 1 here in Larimer County. I'm going to go over this here for you. So much like Matt said, in the same vein, the last 2 legislative sessions, there's been a lot of interest in affordable housing, and specifically one out of, I believe, the prior legislative session, if not the year prior to that, pertaining to tiny homes and defining them more strictly, allowing for a state approval process to establish what is defined as a tiny home on wheels. So we have proactively gone through our code looking for areas where it might be a little ambiguous, what we define as a tiny home and what we don't, and then helping to better define them so that members of our public looking through our code and anybody referring to our code, talking with us, might be able to get that information. I will be able to share my screen here. But effectively, this would be defining a tiny home on wheels rather than tiny house on wheels. Apologies, it seems like the video settings aren't permitting me to.
Jared, are you looking for the code amendment itself?
Yes.
I'll pull it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that much. So we're looking to define it as a single unit dwelling on a chassis with no motor as the means of propulsion, no more than 400 square feet in area, as is defined by the tiny home provisions that we have from state guidance. We're also looking to additionally add the definition of tiny home as a dwelling type. We've always been able to utilize that as a dwelling type, as a permanent dwelling on a site. However, this would help to alleviate any confusion with that. We also define when and where certain foundations would be appropriate for tiny homes to persist on. So temporary foundations allowed not as a cabin or allowed as an accessory living area in certain situations. And that's really the bulk of what this code update was intending to do, to show the permissions that came down from the state level, as well as provide a bit more insight as to what we currently allow within the land use code, and speaking more specifically about foundation types and temporary foundations when they're appropriate and not. The areas that it would be hitting would be the dwelling cabin, accessory living area, and farmstead dwellings, where there are slight updates to help alleviate some of that ambiguity in the code. Outside of that, I believe I'll open it up for any questions that you might have, or Matt, if you wanted to elaborate in any extent, I'd be happy to take it.
Yeah, I would like to just briefly touch base on a couple of things real quick. A dwelling in Larimer County, there is no size limit on it. You have to meet certain building code requirements and whatnot. So if you come in and you get a building permit from the county for a dwelling and you build it at 200 square feet or 400 square feet and you follow the standards of the building department, that's not a tiny home. That's just a dwelling unit. And so we don't have a definition on that. We have a definition for dwelling unit. So that's covered. The other definition or use that you'll find in the code that this conflicts with in a lot of cases is that of an RV. RVs are, a lot of these tiny homes are people that have bought a chassis, a trailer that has a chassis on it. They build their own little model of a unit on there, and then they want to classify that as a dwelling unit and live in it as a tiny home. When the laws at the state were adopted, it said that you have to meet certain state laws for that to be considered a dwelling. And so if I build something on a chassis, on a trailer, and I don't build it pursuant to the laws that are outlined by the state or by what the county is going to be using, which is a as-built building process, so you can come in and say, I've built it to a standard and you have certain certifications to prove that, then that's just going to be considered an RV. That's all it is. And you can use it as you would an RV that you pull behind your truck anywhere. So these tiny homes that we're talking about are tiny homes, and it's important that you look at the definition on the screen that says that has been built. It has no more than 400 square feet, but it's either been approved by the state of Colorado through their permitting process or through Larimer County Building Department's as-built process, and it qualifies as a dwelling unit. If it does, then you could bring it to your property and properly anchor it to the ground on a foundation permanently, and that's considered a dwelling. You could use it as a dwelling in that case. We're also suggesting, as Jared said, that in some cases, preferably an accessory living area, that rather than having it permanently installed on the property, that if it's properly anchored to handle snow and wind loads and those types of things, and it's put down on the ground similar to what a mobile home might be, that you could use it as an accessory dwelling. And then, maybe someday it gets moved off and it's used somewhere else. But I just wanted to provide some of those clarifications. So we still have RVs. Some of them look like RVs. They have to be used as an RV. They're not a dwelling. You could build a tiny, tiny home, and that's still just considered a dwelling. And then we have tiny homes that are built to a certain standard and can be used as a dwelling in most cases.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you.
And thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Jared. Colleagues, yes, Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
First, thank you, Jared. And just to let you know, it was 2022. It was a piece of legislation that we started here in Larimer County and asked Representative Kipp to run for us because that was something where we had folks stuck in RV parks with tiny homes that had nowhere to go because I found out very quickly in my first year as commissioner that these were not legal. So these people had nowhere to go. So really important that I'm glad that we're getting this kind of fine-tuned. So, Matt, just for clarification, if it's because I actually saw one of these over the weekend stuck in hidden behind some trees. If it's on a chassis and it's considered an RV, they can only stay in that location for so long. That's 180 days, correct?
That's correct.
And so if not, then that has to have that the conversation with those folks. Mm-hmm. So can you, and so if they're like living in that while they're building something else, they'd have 180 days to kind of get that done.
And I believe if they have an active building permit at the end of the 180 days, if it's still there, they could hook it to the utility, primarily the septic system, because it should be installed at some point at that point. And then they can operate it during that time that they're under the building permit.
So if it is an RV, then there's certain health code standards for how they're dealing with waste and things like that.
Yes, ma'am.
And then when you talked about accessory dwelling unit, can you expand on that a little bit and kind of, or maybe Jared or something, what is that, because that was I was thinking about if they attach it, if they bring it in, wheel it in, and then attach it to a more permanent foundation, it has to meet certain wind loads, we have tornadoes in the mountains like we did this weekend in Teller County, right? So explain to me this accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah. As it was explained to me, and Jared, feel free to chime in by Eric Freed. When you bring a mobile home on a property, and we're all used to seeing mobile homes on mobile home parks and whatnot, they're placed up on cinder blocks, they're taken off the wheels, basically. They have certain tie downs that anchor them to the ground and make sure they're adequately affixed to the ground so that they don't blow over or certain things like that. They receive skirting around them. They're hooked up to proper utilities and things like that to make sure that they can function appropriately. That's what we're kind of talking about here. If we're gonna allow accessory living areas, and if these are properly constructed and they're brought to a property, it might be best that they're not always a permanent situation. If a property owner says, I want to have an accessory living area on the back of my property for my kids to live in or a family member to live in for a period of time, they could bring it on, get that properly secured in a permanent location, hook it up to the right utilities and things like that, and then somebody can live on it. But it doesn't necessarily have to be there permanently. A permanent dwelling, like most of us are residing in, can actually be picked up off of its foundation and moved, and we've seen that happen. So it would be a similar arrangement to that.
So a little flexibility there for that. So, okay. And then back to this cabin, tiny homes foundation is not allowed as a cabin. That, can you expand on that a little bit? Because they're only allowed in certain areas, it says, zoning districts. So can you,
Jared, do you want to address that?
someone can address that? Just.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to hop in. So cabins are permitted within only the west half of range 70 and ranges 71, 78, so westward of the county, and then north of townships 11 and 12. The standards that apply to cabins are a little bit different than that of a primary single family or single unit dwelling as to what we're proposing. Therefore, we would want a permanent foundation for anything that's to suffice as a cabin, and therefore would probably want to keep away from the temporary foundation component of the tiny homes. This is effectively just saying that in this scenario that someone would want to use it as a cabin with a temporary foundation, that we would opt for the more permanent foundation for that dwelling.
Similarly, a cabin is designed, it can be lived in permanently, a cabin can, but it doesn't necessarily require full utility. It can be one room, it doesn't necessarily have to hook up to a septic system or whatnot. They could have external bathroom facilities, doesn't necessarily have to always have running water, certain things like that. And so we didn't want there to be confusion between cabin and accessory dwelling unit and how those things function. And so it's easier for us to say you can't use it that way. As you can see on the next page, thanks, Jared, for that explanation. Farmstead accessory dwellings, those are intended to be permanent residential dwellings as well. And so we wouldn't want them to be used as that unless they are built in accordance with the full rules that we outlined as a tiny home.
Okay, I appreciate you both. Thank you for answering my questions. This is actually conversations I've been having in the last 6 months and people asking questions about this. So I'm glad we're kind of getting this cleared up and kind of in the code. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens, do you have anything? Just one simple question.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Commissioner. So a tiny home, like the first thing that's listed here in the code, that is on a chassis, it's not on a permanent foundation, it's more than 400 square feet, it's been approved by the state. Can a person live in that?
Yes, sir. It can be considered a permanent
But they're just
dwelling.
not considered a cabin or a farmstead? Is that correct?
That's correct, as long as they come in and secure the proper building permits to have it secured to the ground as a dwelling.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Colleagues,
fun, aren't
anything
they?
else? Or Matt, do you have anything else?
Got one more.
Which one is this?
This is definition family or living unit.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be quick on this one. This was mandated by the state of Colorado, actually, that, for a long time, Larimer County and other communities like Fort Collins and others have had a definition in our codes that say, the occupancy of a resident is a family plus two unrelated guests, or this or that and whatnot. And the term family was used in those areas to define what a family is. And it was often people that are related by blood, marriage, adoption, da-da-da-da. And the state said that no longer can we determine occupancy based upon somebody's familial relationship. In other words, it's no longer, you can just have people living in a house and they can share the quarters and whatnot. And we won't manage the number of people except from the standpoint of the health department regulations. If there's not an adequate sewage disposal system or something like that that can handle those types of things, or from a building code. The building code does have some limitations on the size of houses that people can live in, but we don't monitor that closely right now. We don't think that there's a need to. So the state said you need to modify your uses, your definitions of family, and make sure that you're not discriminating on that behalf. So we've gone through the land use code, and wherever it's appropriate, we've changed the term family, which also relates to our term living unit, because a living unit is defined as who can live in the house. We've modified those throughout our code. We've also modified it in the portion of the code that covers Estes Valley, which is called household and household unit. And so we've updated those to make sure that we're consistent with state law. And that's really what that amendment is about.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions for Matt on this particular item? Yes, Commissioner Stevens.
No, I applaud this. I think this is important. It creates more living space in our community. So I'm glad to see the change, and thank you for making the updates.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion before we make the motion? And that's your turn, Commissioner Stevens.
Okay. This is the one on page 355, right?
I think 355 might work.
Okay.
I think.
I'd have to dig around for
I move the Board of County Commissioners approval of the land use code amendments, which generally include clarifying the intent and applicability of setbacks and standards, adding and updating various use allowances and use descriptions, and refining processes, procedures, and standards for clarity and ease of use as found in file number 24, Code 0278, subject to the following condition. The effective date of the proposed code amendments will be August 12th, 2024.
If you pardon me, Mr. Chairman, if I can just interject, we didn't stop for public comment. We don't have anyone in the audience that would be giving public comment, and I don't believe we have anyone online. But just for technicality.
Please, I apologize, colleagues, and let's rewind the tape a little bit. Forgive me. Is there anyone, well, there's no one here in person who wishes to offer public comment. Is there anyone online who wishes to offer public comment? I'm very sorry.
There are no attendees online.
There isn't, Christina?
There are no attendees online.
No raised hand or *9 or anything like that?
No, sir.
Okay, then, rewinding the tape, we close public comment. I believe we've asked questions, we've deliberated. There is a motion on the table or on the floor or somewhere. Thanks, Commissioner Stevens. I'm thinking I messed up. Any further discussion, colleagues? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And I appreciate all the hard work Matt Lafferty and others have put in. I also wish to acknowledge I neglected to do this earlier because she's behind us. We do have Lindsay from the Clerk and Recorder's Office who is present, and that's really important because it's a public meeting. She takes minutes, she records it, and this is available to the public for their information. So with that, I believe we have concluded our work. Well done. We are adjourned at 5:33 p.m.